Hi guys, it's Finn here from Game Logic. In this new episode of Logically Speaking, we're going to be talking to Brendan here over at Firewalk and just find out a bit more really. So I guess over to you initially, Brendan. For the viewers here, who are you, what do you do, and where are you currently working?
My name is Brendan Hanna Holloway. I'm a principal technical artist at Firewalk Studios. I've been in the game industry for a little over 15 years now. So yeah, that's kind of the quick blurb.
Cool. Yeah. And how did you find yourself into sort of tech art? I know it's a super niche area. So what initially drew you to that out of interest?
I think it's just kind of always been in my nature. My first job, I was technical artist, right out of the gate. And a lot of it comes back to I could never leave anything alone, I think. And so right. I always had to know how everything worked. I wanted to know be able to do everybody's everything. Even when I was in high school, I was I don't understand why when you say jack of all trades, the second part has to be master of none. Maybe you'll never get there, but I don't see why you can't try to get to master of all. So that's just kind of always been the way that I thought about things. And when I got started in the game industry, I'd been kicked out of college for the second time, and I'd been doing a bunch of classes involved in various forms of 3D animation, 3D rendering, 3D graphics programming stuff. So I'd been kind of all over the place there as well. And there was a game studio in the town where I got kicked out of college. That was Volition. And I applied there because I was I need something to do now that I don't have school. And this looks really interesting. And I hit up their recruiter. I was like, hey, I see these 3 different jobs you have. I probably could do some part of those. If you have an internship, I'll do that, whatever. And he's and I sent him over some of the work I'd done on some RenderMan shaders and a Maya plugin that I built and a few other things like that. And he was like, why don't you come interview for tech art? And went through the interview process, and sure enough, I got hired. And so I came in right as they transitioned out of the end of pre-production into production on Saints Row 2. And so I was at Volition for just over 3 years. I finished up Saints Row 2, did some work on Red Faction Armageddon. And then I moved to Seattle to take a senior technical artist job at Monolith Productions, where I worked on a bunch of different projects that got shuffled around. And finally, the one that saw the light of day that I had the most involvement on was Guardians of Middle Earth, which was a little League of Legends style game, but with Lord of the Rings characters on it. And then after a couple years there, one of my friends who I'd met at Volition was like, hey, we could really use you down in Southern California at Treyarch. And so in 2012, I went down to Treyarch and I worked on all of the Black Ops games from then up and through the end of this last year when I moved over to Firewalk.
And you mentioned as well there sort of being a jack of all trades, and for people that don't know, there's a lot of different aspects from what I understand in tech art, from sort of rigging to VFX to animation and all of that lot as well. Just out of interest, are there any sort of areas there that you found yourself gravitating more towards?
The one that I've primarily focused on, partially just through opportunity and also through my natural interest, has been shader development. And that started up all the way back at Volition. I'd done some shader stuff, I mentioned, in some classes, using RenderMan and very, very early version of CG when NVIDIA and Microsoft first came out with the CG HLSL stuff. I got to play around some with that first version. And I was really taken with that because I always enjoyed programming and writing code, but I also, once you could get a visual result from that, it was okay, this is where it's at. And I just I loved it. And when I was at Volition on Saints Row 2, all the shaders had been written with Artisan, which was this super old node-based shader editing software. And they'd gone out of business after all the shaders had been written. And so there was this one old machine that still had a functioning license. And everybody was don't bonk it, don't touch it, don't kill that machine at all, or we're screwed. And I was well, can I just go in and dig around and see what we can do? And I just started messing around with them Notepad and editing the shaders. And I got them cleaned up and consolidated and added some new features that the artist requested. And after that, everybody was cool, you just go with that. And that's sort of been the jam ever since.
Awesome. Cool. And I guess for aspiring tech artists out there as well, is there anything that you would maybe recommend people sort of do to sort of start building up that portfolio, or what would you sort of suggest for the newbies on the scene?
So in terms of a portfolio, what I would say is that the quality is far more important than the quantity. So don't feel like you got to fill it out with a whole bunch of projects to look impressive. Really focus on only putting your absolute best stuff in there, because then it won't like confuse the message. Like people, like the stuff that you really love, put that in there, because everybody's going to want to talk to you about your portfolio. There's going to be plenty there to go on anyway. Like when I'm looking at people, I don't need to see like 5 examples that they can do something. I really just need one that shows they really know what they're doing.
Cool. No, I think that's super useful advice. And I guess moving on to the sort of second question here, the sort of second section as well. You talked about a bit about sort of Volition before now, and I guess through your journey through the industry, how did you find yourself at Firewalk now? How have you ended up where you are currently?
So like I spent a long time at Treyarch, like almost a decade, really. So I did work on every Black Ops version of Call of Duty since Black Ops 2, which is a lot. And that's like a very regimented cadence. There's like a certain feel to being inside, like, well, what was like the biggest game publishing company, right? And like being a part of such like a very high profile studio and working on a team like that. And so I became like very familiar with that feel. And I started to see like the pluses and minuses of that. And I felt like it was time to really branch out and take a different direction. Also, I spent all my time working on proprietary engines. Volition had a proprietary engine, Monolith, proprietary engine, Treyarch, definitely proprietary engine, right? And Firewalk is building, they're an independent studio. They're growing from a small team to a large team. They're filling out all their workflows, as they transition into like a ramp up towards production mindset. And they're doing it all on Unreal, which is this like industry standard in so many senses that I'd had like no professional exposure to, right? Like you can't avoid it entirely in the game industry, but I hadn't like made a ship title on it, So I was like, okay, there are a lot of new things to learn here still. And it felt like time to pursue that.
Cool, awesome. And I guess on sort of Unreal 5 Unreal in general, with sort of Unreal 5 coming about and all of the new stuff that's offering with Luma and a bunch of the other tools as well, is that something that sort of got you excited coming from sort of older proprietary tech? How are you sort of viewing that?
There's like pluses and minuses, right? Like it's easy to get very excited when you see Unreal because they're very good at putting together these like stunning demos of their tech, like they know what they're doing, right?
Definitely.
But like it cuts the other way, right? Because like some of the like really juicy problems have been figured out for you, and you don't get to like delve into that and have that excitement yourself. You're more like, okay, well, how do we like make it usable? Which is very interesting, but it's not like the sexy side, right? So there's that, and then the other thing is, and it's fascinating when that new tech comes out because like, okay, this is possible, but what does that mean for like this specific set of problems that we have, like given our project, right? Like what's our frame rate target? Like how many different characters are we going to have running around at the same time? Can we do what they did for this one in the demo on 5 or 150 or whatever, whatever it is, right? And so you get to still see how it translates to your specific real world problem. Awesome. And then as we're sort of moving towards the end here, sort of delving a bit more into, I guess, your process within Firewalk and how you go about recruitment yourself, when you are looking for an individual candidate, what exactly is going to jump out to you when you're looking at sort of one portfolio and one resume to the next? It depends on the level of the position that I'm hiring for, right? Like I don't look for the same thing across the board. So there's not a simple answer here. Sure. But like when I'm looking at somebody who's coming in, like first job, like say like an internship or associate level or whatever the different places call it, I look for breadth actually more than depth, because I want somebody who knows how to figure things out and has a strong curiosity, right? And the people that have strong curiosity can't like stick to one thing often.
Yeah.
As this is my opinion, right? Like,
yeah.
and so like, I look for that a lot because, you know, a lot of times, so also like a lot of my experience is on these proprietary engines, like I said before. So a lot of times you're having to teach someone your specific tools and functions and workflows and all of this, right? And so having someone who is like coachable, clever, not just smart, like clever is a little different, is going to help you because you want them to know general base knowledge. But if they have like a lot of specific knowledge, that's not always going to translate to your situation. So that's not primary concern at those like kind of just coming into the industry levels.
Sure. Cool. And I guess sort of finally here, from your standpoint, what in your opinion do you think employers could maybe do or sort of add into their process to really make it as good as possible for the candidate?
I think that game industry interviews as a whole are way too long. Like everybody's got this like idea that I guess we inherited from like Google and Facebook, where they're like, if there are 47 hats in a blender and one of them's red, what color is the average after 9 days? Or, you know, these weird like esoteric questions that you're like, who gives a shit, man? It's like, you know, and I understand where they're coming from with that kind of thinking, right? But you need to expand yourself open to more like types of candidates, I feel like, in the game industry for sure right now, right? Like we've been very stuck. It's a industry that is young, right? Compared to like so many of these other ones, even within the tech sector. And it's finally hitting this stage where I feel like the maturity is like accelerating right now in the industry. And so I think that we need to reevaluate a lot of the assumptions on things that we've like inherited from other industries or just always had as a legacy feature of our industry. And so like these like 8-hour interviews don't need to happen. Like you can get a really good read on a candidate in like 2 to 4 interviews that are like an hour. You know, you don't need every single person who might ever work with them to chime in on every single aspect of this human, right? I also think that the way we write job descriptions and expect like candidates to show up could be a lot more flexible, right? Like there's so many requirements that like everybody wants to put everything that they could ever want in there and act like it's super critical. And at the end of the day, there's probably like 2 things that's really are critical. And I think like there could be much more of like an open dialogue along that with all of the candidates as well. And that would help find everybody who could be qualified and not artificially weed out people who are incredibly skilled and talented, but maybe don't know that about themselves yet. Right? Yeah. And then also like the whole workplace landscape is shifting right now because like with work from home having been functional obviously for 2 years, like things didn't screech to a halt as much as they could have. Right? And so it's like, hey, maybe a lot more positions than we thought before could be remote. Maybe that means like the pool of hiring is so much broader than we expected before. We don't have to look within like 100 miles or like how much we can afford to pay a relocation, right? We can just say like, holy crap, like this person's amazing and they love it in Poughkeepsie or whatever, right? Like, and that's totally great, you know?
Yeah. No, I completely agree as well. And I think you mentioned there sort of condensed processes as well. As more studios begin to sort of take that shorter process, they're going to be able to get people quicker too. So it's a benefit for both sides. And remote working as well, definitely sort of taking the industry by storm. We'll see with even some studios allowing international too. Like you said, that pool of talent is just going to forever sort of expand there. But no, I really appreciate the insights here, Brendan, and for joining us here on this episode of Logically Speaking.
You know, like, take everything I say with a grain of salt, right? Like, my experience is just mine. And I've been like a tech artist all the way through, right? So I can only talk about sort of that path. But
Sure.
I'll share whatever I think I know.
Sure, no, definitely a good disclaimer there as well. But again, that's sort of everything for this one. So appreciate everyone tuning in, and until the next time.